Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Mr. Muller's seventh grade science class. Today is Wednesday, April 8th, and we are going to move on to fungus, okay, which is page 66 through 69 is the reading that we're going to do today. And then there'll be a Google form question you'll have to fill out, as well as a few Edpuzzle videos to watch. So I just want to talk real quickly about the fact that the pairs that we normally have in our classrooms. So for me, second hour, we have Mrs. Bundrock, fifth hour, which is eighth grade. You guys don't have, but Mrs. Marketon, and then seventh hour, we have Diana. So just know that those pairs are available to help if you ever have some questions. They are in the Google Classrooms. So if you just need their help, you can contact them through there, or you can email them if you need extra help. So just know that those pairs are still available and ready and willing to help anytime you have a question. So like I said, we are going to move on to fungi. I'm going to read from the book, then we're going to go through this PowerPoint real quick, which is going to be a lot of repeats. So if you would just like to skip the reading because you did it on your own or something, you can certainly do that when I get to the time. You can just skip forward. And after this, I'll just talk about the few assignments that we have for this, and then we'll be done. But I just want to talk quickly about, we have done bacteria and viruses up to this point, and then we will finish fungus early next week, start with protists, and then that'll wrap up our 4 main microorganisms. So just know that there's some point there's probably going to be a Google form talking about the main characteristics of all these things. I don't expect you at the end of this unit to know every single detail of every microorganism you learned in the several weeks that we talked about them, right? But I do need you to know the main characteristics. So for instance, how do they reproduce? Are they eukaryotic or prokaryotic? Which means, do they have stuff to protect their DNA, like a nucleus inside their cell? Or are they very simple, like bacteria, and have basically just DNA inside their cell? How do they obtain their food? Are they heterotrophic, meaning they have to go get their food? Are they autotrophic, meaning they can make their own food like plants? Or are they both? Okay. And then what is their kind of main roles in nature? How are they beneficial? And then how are they harmful? Because one thing I need you to know about these microorganisms, and probably what you know or have found out as we've talked about them, is they all can cause infectious diseases. Okay, so we're going to talk about fungus and some of the infectious diseases that they cause, but also we're going to talk about some of the good things, because these 4 microorganisms, even viruses, do some good things in the world. Okay, so we've talked about bacteria and virus. Now we're going to talk about fungi. Fungi, page 66. What are the characteristics of fungi and what is the role of fungi in nature? We're going to get to the second part, what is the role, in our next reading, and I'll do that. I'll videotape my lecture for next week for that. My Planet Diary. Obviously, you guys know that I love ants. They're probably my favorite of the insects, and I love insects. So this is one of my favorite types of bugs, which is the leafcutter ants. Okay. You may have heard of an ant farm, but have you heard of ant farmers? Leafcutter ants act like farmers, growing fungus for food. First, the ants cut pieces of leaves from trees, then the ants carry the leaves to an underground nest, where the leaves are crushed and chewed to make a mulch. Surprisingly, the ants don't eat the mulch leaves. They place them in a special growing chamber or garden. Then they move strands of fungus from the existing garden to the new chamber where it grows on leaves. The ants help the fungus grow by removing harmful bacteria and mold. Finally, the ants eat the fungus. Number 1, how do ants act like farmers? Well, they prepare special places for the fungus to grow, and then they remove the bacteria and mold. Just like farmers will have to protect their crops when they grow it from pests, the ants have to do something similar. How do leafcutter ants and the fungus benefit from their relationship? Well, for example, the ants make a chamber for the fungus to grow, and then, of course, the fungus provides food for the ants. So you can see here, even the fungus has to fight against bacteria. It's not just humans, it's not just other types of animals, but plants, and of course, microorganisms themselves have to battle other microorganisms constantly. So we've actually utilized that very well as humans by stealing some of the ideas and some of the methods and some of the chemicals that these microorganisms use to fight other microorganisms. All right, so we've stolen the way that viruses infect bacteria, and we've used that to fight our own bacteria infections to pretty good success. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. Bottom of page 66. What are the characteristics of fungi? You accidentally left an orange in your backpack. When you find it, it is covered in white fuzz. The orange is being digested by a mold, which is a type of fungus. You may be familiar with other kinds of fungi too. For example, the molds that grow in stale bread and the mushrooms that sprout in forests are also fungi. I just want to mention the three main fungi that I want you to know are molds and slimes, right? Which you've seen maybe in a wet basement. You can see it on the ground. I mean, you don't want this because it can be bad for your breathing and stuff like that. But maybe you've seen kind of the dark fuzz or white fuzz of mold growing in a basement in a damp area, or on a piece of old fruit or piece of old bread. Of course, mushrooms. Okay, you've seen those growing in forests. Some of you have eaten mushrooms on a hamburger, pizza, whatever. And the last one is lichen, which actually is a symbiotic relationship with algae to produce lichen. So lichen is a fungi and an algae, and you can see those on rocks and on tree trunks and stuff like that. Maybe me saying it, you're like, what the heck is a lichen? But once you see it, you're like, oh yeah, I recognize those. I see those everywhere. Okay, page 67. Most fungi share several important characteristics. Fungi are eukaryotes that have cell walls, or heterotrophs that feed by absorbing their food and use spores to reproduce. So the main blue key here is the most important thing I want you to know of this entire reading. They are eukaryotes, meaning they have nucleus and membrane-bound organelles inside their cell, and they have cell walls. So cell walls, plants also have cell walls, and animals don't, though. So they are similar to plants in that way. And they're heterotrophs that feed by absorbing their food. So that means they have to go and get their food, or they have to consume their food or organic material. They cannot make their own food like some bacteria and plants can. And they use spores to reproduce. So we're going to talk a little bit about spores on the next page, but that's how they reproduce. In addition, fungi need moist, warm places in which to grow. They thrive on damp tree barks, moist foods, lawns coated with dew, damp forest floors, and even wet bathroom tiles. Cell structure. Fungi range in size from tiny unicellular yeasts, which help grow bread, to large multicellular fungi. They think that the biggest organism living on Earth right now is not the blue whale, but in fact this really large fungus that is thousands of yards long. The cells of all fungi are surrounded by cell walls. Except for the simplest fungi such as unicellular yeast, cells of most fungi are arranged in structures called hyphae. Hyphae are the branching thread-like tubes that make up the bodies of multicellular fungi. The hyphae of some fungi are continuous threads of cytoplasm that contain many nuclei. Substances move quickly and freely through the hyphae. What a fungus looks like depends on how its hyphae are arranged. In fuzzy-looking molds, the thread-like hyphae are loosely tangled. In other fungi, the hyphae are packed tightly together. Obtaining food. Although fungi are heterotrophs, they do not take food into their bodies as you do. Instead, fungi absorb food through hyphae and grow into the food source. First, the fungus grows hyphae into a food source. Then, digestive chemicals ooze from the hyphae into the food. The chemicals break down the food into small substances that can be absorbed by the hyphae. Some fungi feed on dead organisms. Others are parasites that break down the chemicals in organisms. So tomorrow I'm going to have a little dissection, small, quick dissection of a mushroom. I'll just show you, cut into it. I'll just show you the little pieces of it. And you can see on page 67, capstock, hyphae. Won't be anything more complicated than that, but that'll be for tomorrow. Okay, next page 68 and 69. Page 68, reproduction in fungi. The way that fungi reproduce guarantees their survival and spread. Most fungi reproduce both asexually and sexually. Fungi usually reproduce by making spores. The lightweight spores are surrounded by a protective covering and can be carried easily through air or water to new places. Fungi produce millions of spores, more than can ever survive. So a lot of living things, they take the strategy of, I'm just going to produce a lot of babies, so to speak, throw them out there, and I know some of them will survive. While other living things like humans put a lot of energy and effort in one or just a few babies and and focus on helping them survive. Excuse me. Only a few spores will fall where conditions are right for them to grow. Fungi produce spores in reproductive structures called fruiting bodies. The appearance of a fruiting body varies from one type of fungus to another. In some fungi, such as mushrooms and puffballs, the visible part of the fungus is the fruiting body. In other fungi, such as bread molds, the fruiting bodies are tiny stalk-like hyphae that grow upward from the other hyphae. A knob-like spore case at the tip of each stalk contains the spores. So look at these two pictures down here. I'm not going to read every single word in these, But if you take a look at the picture on the left, it's a new yeast cell budding from a parent yeast cell. They're going to be the exact same genetically, and it just buds right off of it. And you can have several of them bud off the parent cell. And like I said, exact same genetics. There's no DNA exchanging. So we say that's asexual or not sexual reproduction. The sexual reproduction is a little bit different. So you can see the hyphae of two fungi grow together, and then genetic material is exchanged. Whenever genetic material is exchanged, you're going to get a unique individual instead of the copy of the parent, which happens again in asexual budding reproduction. Okay, last page here we're going to read for today. Real quick on classification of fungi. I'm actually not going to read this because I don't think it's that important for you to understand. But just know that fungi are actually more closely related to animals and plants than they are to bacteria or, other types of things, other microorganisms that, seems kind of strange, but it's true. We've done the genetic testing, and they are more closely similar to plants and animals than they are to bacteria. We'll read these other pages next week, but let's go through this PowerPoint real quick, and then we'll move on to talking about the assignments for today. .3 vocab. Whoops. Oh my gosh. I apologize. Hopefully that wasn't on there the whole time. I wasn't. Bear with me, folks. You guys know Mr. Muller's class, there's always technical difficulties. Okay. 2.4 vocab. Fungus, hyphae, fruiting bodies, budding, and lichen. This is not going to cooperate, is it? It's going to be very, very slow. Characteristics of fungi. They're eukaryotes, like I said, which means they have a nucleus. They're more complex than prokaryotes. Prokaryotes, an example of that is bacteria. They have, of course. Okay. They have cell walls, okay, very similar to plants, different from animal cells. They are heterotrophs. They feed by absorbing. They have to absorb and consume organic material. They can't make their own. They use spores to reproduce, either asexually or sexually, and they need warm, wet places to grow. Okay, structure of a mushroom. Fungi are arranged in structures called hyphae, single branching thread-like tubes. They make up the bodies of the multicellular fungi. Some are continuous threads. They allow substances to move quickly through the fungus. And I'm going to talk about these three things tomorrow, but the cap, stalk, and hyphae, we're going to talk about those when I do the dissection tomorrow. Obtaining food. Food is absorbed through the hyphae, which are kind of the cells that you can see on a fungus. Fungus first grow into a food source, and then it kind of oozes hyphae into the dead organisms, which they use chemicals to break down the cells of the things that they're eating, and then absorb that into their cells. Kind of gross. Where did my mouse go? There we go. Okay, here we go. There we go. Like I said several times, they reproduce sexually and asexually. Spores are produced in the reproductive structure called a fruiting body. Okay, so just remember the main parts of this, the characteristics of fungi. Talked about that, and then what is the role, which we're going to discuss coming up in the next part of the reading. So after this video, lecture, and reading and PowerPoint, I want you to go to Google Classroom and finish the questions on the Google form for fungus, reading pages 66 through 69. And then I want you to watch the two Edpuzzle videos. One is an Amoeba Sister video about fungus, so some basic stuff about fungus. Then it cuts into somebody else, another teacher, talking about fungal infections. There is some kind of gross pictures of fungal infections, so if you don't want to, you can skip forward on that part, and then, but she lays out some really interesting things about how to prevent these fungal infections, what they kind of look like, and, what they, how do you get them and how do you spread them and stuff like that. So this is a good video. And then the other one is one of my favorite videos, which is talking about the zombie fungus, which we may have talked about in class earlier this year, but I always find it very interesting. And now we're talking about fungus again, so I think it is relevant. But it's about fungus that gets into some of these bugs and kind of drives them crazy, and it controls their brain, and they go up to the top somewhere high. They die. They absorb the organic material of the insect, and then they spread out through spores. And the reason why they go up high is so the spores can spread out really far distances. Okay. And so that's another video you'll watch that'll be interesting. Okay. And let's see. Yeah, so tomorrow I'll do a dissection video, and I believe there's going to be another flip grid for tomorrow, asking you to go around and look for some fungus and make sure that you don't pick them up, touch it, or eat it, or any of that stuff. All right, so thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.